Hi, my name is Tomasz and you're watching Casual DIY channel. In today's video I'm going to show you my process of milling rough lumber. Check it out. Right then, so I'm going to take this rough sawn pine board into a board that's ready to be used on a project. Now, why would you buy a rough sawn board to start with? Basically, it's a lot cheaper than already planed boards. And I mean, the difference is really big. So investing in few tools over time will actually get you the money back. But what tools will you actually need for this process? First of all, a jointer. Next, a thickness planer. And finally, a table saw. Right, let me take you through the process. Is it essential to actually have a jointer or a thickness planer or even a table saw for this process? There are always ways to replace those tools with something different to save you money on purchasing multiple tools, or actually sometimes you just don't have space for that many tools. For example, this Titan jointer also has the thickness option as well, so you actually don't need a thickness planer as a separate machine. Both of those options are in this one budget tool, plus obviously the table saw. However, in the future, I'm going to be covering how to replace a jointer or a thickness planer or a table saw, how to use other tools to get the same results. So if you don't want to miss that future content, please subscribe to my channel so you won't miss it in the future. However, in today's video, I'm going to be showing you step by step the process of milling rough lumber using all three tools. First of all, we're going to use the jointer. Now, the jointer has got one job to do. It will get you one straight and true face of a board and one straight edge of a board that's at 90 degrees to the face of the board that you already jointed. Then you proceed to the next step, which is the thickness planer. However, sometimes it's actually beneficial to bounce between those two tools, between the jointer and the thickness planer, but we'll get to that in a second. First of all, I'm going to try to get one straight and even face of a board. In my case, the board I'm going to be jointing has got a bit of coping. Just goes like that. I've got a low spot here, and there's a gap in the middle of the board. Now, the way to joint this board is to have those two low spots on the table, okay? That will give you the stability when you're going to be pushing the piece of wood through your jointer, okay? If you were to put that board on the other side, it will be just rocking left to right on the table, and you definitely don't want that. In a similar scenario, if for example I've got a bit of rocking over here, so from one edge to another the board rocks slightly. So for the first couple of passes I need to establish a place where I'm going to be putting the pressure on the board so it will not move, rock or shift on me until I remove the high spots. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to place my push blocks in a place where I can firmly and steadily push the board through the blades without making the board to rock from left to right. So it is very important to actually establish what issues there are with the rough sawn timber you've got that you will be jointing. And remember, a little goes a long way, so try to remove as little of material as possible. I'm going to start with 0.5 millimeter. If you want a bit more detailed tutorial on a jointer, I do have you covered. I've got a separate video on a jointer, how to use it correctly and how it works. I'm going to leave a link to it down below in the description of this video. It's also worth checking the board after first couple of passes. As you can see, I'm actually taking some material on the high spot here and on that side. Middle of the board is still not touched by the blades. Now, it's also quite important to check your board to see if you've got any tear out at the start of your jointing. That means you're just going against the grain. If you are having some tear out, just swap the way you feed the board through, so it will go with the grain, not against it. Later on, when you're actually not sure or you can't see exactly if the material is being taken off the board, just use a pencil to mark the board, and then you'll see exactly if there are still any high and low spots on your board. Okay, so I'm more or less finished with one straight and flat face on this board, and to make sure it is nice and flat, just use a square, check it out along all the length of the board. Mine is absolutely perfect. Now at this point you actually got two options. Straight away we can now reference that flat face of the board on the fence of the jointer and creating a straight edge. However, that step could cause you some issues. As I mentioned before about the grain direction of the board, sometimes when you're going to be pushing the board, it will start tearing out the fibers of your board. Now, the only solution would be to flip the board and put it against the fence, and then you will join the edge with the grain orientation of your board. However, you can't do that as we only got one jointed face. So in most cases, if you've got the ability to use the thicknesser at this point, I would say is the best way to do, to actually create a flat and parallel face on the other side of the board. Then when you come to the jointer to joint one of the edges, it doesn't matter how you're going to flip the board, as both of the faces will be flat and parallel. That could be reference of the fence from the jointer. And if you do the first pass and you notice the tear out, flip it over and you're good to go. So for me personally, now I'm actually going to go to the thickness planer and sort out the other face of the board. So for me, it's just the best way to do it like that. So I am at my thickness planer. I do have a small shop, it's about 21 square meters, and it actually does help where all my tools, all my workbenches are on casters, so I can move them about freely. And these two carts, they actually drop down and they go beneath my main workbench, so it does save me a lot of space. Now, operating a thickness planer is really simple, and I do have an in-depth video about it again, so I'm going to drop a link to that down below in the description of this video. I'm now just going to drop the cutter head to the right position so I can start removing some material off this board. Now at this stage you are able to actually take your boards to the thickness that you require. However, if you are just milling your lumber for later use, obviously try to leave it as thick as possible. I know what thickness I need from this board, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it to the correct thickness for my project straight away. So I'm hoping you're actually going to be able to see this. The thickness planer removed the high spot from more or less the middle of the board here, and the low spots they are still not touched. As you will continue the process, it will make the board whole and flat. Now, for example, if you were using the thickness planer on a board that has got some coping in it, or basically doesn't have one straight face and flat face that can be referenced on the table of the machine, then it will actually transfer all that unevenness to the top of the board as well, so you will never get a nice and true flat board. Hence, it's really important to actually use a jointer first on one of the faces to be able to reproduce with the thickness planer the same result on the other side of the board, and it will actually be parallel to the jointed face as well. So it's very important to follow these steps along. Now, with a thickness planer, the same rule applies when it comes to the grain orientation of the board. If you are getting some tear out, swap the in-feed side of your board. Also be careful when you are jointing or using your thickness planer on a board with some knots. Mine started to get loose, so I just popped it out with a hammer and off it went. So that's one of the things that you need to watch out for, so you don't damage your tools basically and your board. Okay, however, I've got now two flat, straight and parallel faces on this board. I'm going back to the jointer to sort out one of the edges. That edge will be straight and true, and it will be at 90 degrees to both of the faces. And now you can take your square to make sure you've got a nice and a crisp edge at 90 degrees to the both of the faces. No issues there at all. Alright then, and our board at this point is flat and parallel on both of the faces of the board, plus we've got one straight edge that's at 90 degrees to both of the faces. So now we are only left with one edge to sort out. Now, to be honest, if you are just milling your lumber and you're going to use it at a later stage, you could be done at this point. So you don't take too much material off the board if you don't have to. Okay, later on when the project comes along and you've got your lumber sorted, you can remove that rough edge by just ripping the boards to the exact width you need for your project, which will save you some time in the process. If you want the other edge to be sorted, you're just going to be using your table saw. We can reference off the table one of the flat faces, and the jointed edge that we already got will reference on the fence of your table saw, making sure that the other side, that the other edge will be parallel to the first one that we jointed. So let's do that now. And there you go, guys. Now this board is uniform, flat, true and straight. I can now use it for my project. Now this is my process of milling lumber. If you've got any tips or any suggestions to other viewers as well, please share those in the comments down below, as the more options we've got, the more information we share on this channel, it will somewhere help somebody on the way, especially when they are starting the adventure with woodworking. Now for me, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching. Have a fantastic week. Take care.